You're listening to the Falconry Podcast with Ben Woodruff. Hello, everybody. Ben Woodruff here with another episode of the Falconry Podcast. I'm here with John Griggs.
Hey, everybody.
And John runs the Falcon's Ledge YouTube channel. And John, do you want to tell them a little bit more about your channel?
Yeah, I focus mostly on space and flight sims. These are study sims, not necessarily games per se, but I also do some falconry stuff, and I do lots of hardware reviews.
Good channel, solid channel, so be sure to check them out, show them some love on there. And John and I, as you know, if you've listened to any of our previous presentations on here, is that we're huge fans of Peregrine falcons. And in my opinion, arguably the best overall, the best falcon in terms of not only its abilities, but its comparative loyalty and comparative ease of training. Now, John actually just drew out from the lottery that is done for the Wild Take Peregrine. So he has the opportunity to actually do that. So still figuring out the details on that, but got some nests that we have been watching. But because of that, and because it's a species we're so passionate about, we wanted to talk about Wild Take Peregrines and a little bit of the history. It's strange, you know, John and I aren't that old, but there's so many new falconers coming in that don't have a lot of the back history, and including the history before John and I. And so there's really some important things that happen in this story. And so we kind of want to talk about that. So, yeah, when we got started as young falconers, John and I, peregrine falcons were listed as an endangered species. You most certainly could not obtain one from the wild at any age, not a first-year passage bird that was migrating, and not an eyas or a baby, pulled from a nest. And the only way to potentially get one was from a captive bred. You could buy a captive bred peregrine, and
and that was really sad for those of us who were, my side of the mountain falconers, people who came in through that means, and really wanted to kind of have that experience like that character had with Frightful and whatnot. And it just wasn't possible. It wasn't in the foreseeable future for us.
Yeah, in any way, because they were so expensive. And even if you had the money, doesn't mean that a breeder would necessarily sell one to you, and you couldn't get one from the wild. And for both John and I, my side of the mountain, the book is really what kind of opened our eyes to falconry, and it was just such a mesmerizing story. And so that was the goal. And there was this disproportionate, incorrect view, therefore, that kind of started to permeate through new up-and-coming falconers our age, and maybe people who got in 10 years before us, who were like, oh, this is a bird that you someday look up to, maybe finding a way to get one, instead of thinking of it as like the go-to bird, the standard bird to fly if you want to fly long wings. And that's the world we came into. Now, what the world had been before was very different. And I knew a lot of these stories, but I got to research it a lot more when I wrote my trapping book, Trapping Essentials. I reached out to a lot of old timers who were very friendly, very willing to share their stories back in the days in the early 1900s, pioneering back in the 1900s. But they would go out trapping, and they knew from, remember, this is before the internet, back in the day, so the very few falconry books available are mostly European falconry, so you had a lot of stuff out there depicting peregrines, right, where it's like, oh, here's a knight or a king or a lord with a peregrine falcon, and so there was already that knowledge, hey, this is a species that's good for falconry. And one of the ways that was pioneered that was really kind of unique was trapping on beaches. When peregrines begin migrating, they book it and they start heading south, and they build their muscles very quickly. But these are babies with very little experience, and they seem to congregate along beaches. Two specific areas that were very popular to trap on were Assateague Island in the Northeast, and also in the Gulf of Mexico. And along these beaches, peregrine falcons getting ready to cross part of the Atlantic or part of the Gulf of Mexico as they moved further south these peregrines would just be sitting on the beach, just sitting there. And falconers would go down. Then they'd, one of the gentlemen I interviewed, he said they'd have the old World War II Willys Jeeps. And they'd drive out and they'd go out with binoculars and they'd see a peregrine. They're like, all right, okay, there's a peregrine on the left side of the Jeep. You bail out of the right-hand side of the Jeep and dig down and dig a hole in the sand really quick and bury yourself. And then they had these elaborate headsets that looked like bunch grasses or shrubs that grew near the beach. And they would put that on their head, and they would just hold a pigeon while they themselves were buried in the ground. The Jeep would drive away, and the peregrine would see the pigeon wiggling around and would fly over to get it. And the falconer would, with the other hand, slowly reach around and just grab the peregrine with their bare hands. And it's ridiculous that works, and it works so easily and so well. But you got to remember, these peregrines had flown, some of them from as far away as Canada, and now they're in the Gulf of Mexico a week or two later, and they're hungry. And an easy meal is an easy meal. A lot of the falconers I talked to, they told me that very quickly they started to realize we don't have to make these elaborate headsets. Well, there's so much trash that washes up on the beach. Just put like a wooden crate with a slit for your eyes or a couple holes for your eyes and just put that over your head, and that's plenty. The peregrines would still come over. And this is also where some of the very first harness trapping, where you put like a pigeon harness, happened in the United States. And if you want to read more about this, there's a great article in Life magazine that documented it at the time that one of these falconers led me to. And I couldn't find it. I looked over my house. I was going to bring it up. But if you check out my book, Trapping Essentials, I share a lot of their stories in there too. But they would usually trap for 2-3 days, like on the weekend. They get a group together. Hey, we're going to go trapping. We're going to trap 12 birds, 15 birds. And then at night, by the fire, they would just man them, train them, handle them. And these birds were just like a bird that had been trained their whole life. They were dream birds. They would eat almost instantly and were very gentle, very easy to work with. And at the end of the weekend, they would set free all the other birds. So everybody would take the one bird that they wanted to train and hunt with for the season, and all the rest were set free to continue on in their migration. And it's like, that's so cool.
That is awesome.
Like, can you imagine that? And just, especially the early guys where there weren't even permits. It's like, I'm just doing this thing that ancient people did, and just go drive down to a beach. And it sounds so fun. Can you imagine that? Gulf of Mexico, on the beach, sitting by the fire, roasting hot dogs while you're manning your peregrine falcon that was trapped a couple hours earlier. It's cool.
Just seems like something that's just impossible in today's modern world of at least first world countries where, everything is so top-down authoritarian in regards to falconry.
Yeah. It just is because we have made... Falconry in and of itself is actually, it seems weird to people in the United States because we don't have a long history of it, but it's actually not all that strange. It's a little odd, but in America, we have turned raptors into these icons, these personifications of the wild. Oh, and so to work with them in any way, it's so special. And then and that's why there's a lot of anti-falconry sentiment in America. There's not many falconers, but there's so much anti-falconry sentiment in part because it's like, you can't train the symbol of the wild because then it's not in the wild. It's like, well, you're training a bird, you're hunting with it, you're flying it for a season or two and setting it free. Like, it's not that unusual compared to, in other countries, they understand that. But this all changed. Everything changed. There was a pesticide, a bug spray called DDT, and they believed it to be harmless. They thought, this doesn't hurt vertebrate animals. They even would spray it on people in demonstrations to say, see, look, we're spraying all these kids in the pool, and they're laughing and giggling. It doesn't hurt anything. It's this new miracle poison that will help farmers have a greater yield to their crops without their crops being eaten by bugs. Yay! Well, turns out that poison, it would kill the bugs, little birds eat the bugs, and then peregrine falcons eat the little birds. And it would not kill the peregrines, but it would accumulate and build up in their system. And it had a side effect that their eggshells were thin. It would sometimes kill the offspring in the egg, but even if it didn't, the eggshells were so thin that mothers would crush their own eggs. Really, really kind of sad. So you had years and years and years of this going on, and the wild populations of peregrines in America, in Canada, and a few other countries started to tank, started to plummet. And when this was finally realized, the pesticide was banned, but it was already in the system and it was already in the birds in the wild. In addition to that, people started programs like the Peregrine Fund, and many private falconers started breeding programs to breed them to release into the wild. And there are so many unnamed unsung heroes who worked their tails off to boost the numbers of peregrines that did not have DDT in their system.
Not to mention sunk a lot of their own money into it. And I think that is one of those things that is often not mentioned. I mean, time, that's a huge deal. And all of this, the other things that they did, but they also, there was a monetary cost to all of that, because these were people who were breeding falcons in order to sell them as well. But many of them were released into the wild to try to help to save the species.
Exactly. There's one falconer, I won't mention his name because I didn't ask permission ahead of time, and I try to be conscientious of that, but he's an old-timer who, at the time when he was young, lived in California, and he, worked his butt off in one of the government breeding programs. They were having no success, and he's like, hey, look, let me just help you. And he told me stories of how he was working 2 jobs, he was in his 20s, and he would go and, he would get up at 3 a.m. just to go and to do all the artificial insemination and all the work to, all the feeding, all the cleaning, everything for no pay. It's just because he cared about the species. And that's very rarely mentioned up. Now, we got to mention something else, too. And I never hear people mention this. Peregrine falcons, if we're being pure with our vocabulary, have never, ever been an endangered species. Now, what? Yes, they were. Well, here's the truth of it.
Blasphemy.
Blasphemy! You can't say that. Of course they were endangered. Well, species. There's no caveat added when I said that. I didn't say the peregrines in the United States were classified as an endangered species. Well, that's true. But the peregrine is a worldwide species. It lives in almost every country of the world. And I got a shout out too. I usually say they live everywhere except Antarctica, but that's not true. And I had somebody on my YouTube channel here point out one time, which I appreciated this. They're like, I live in New Zealand. There's no peregrines in New Zealand. I'm like, holy cow, how did I miss that one? It's a big mistake. But they are a worldwide species. And worldwide, they were not in danger of going extinct. But in a number of countries, they were endangered of going extinct. And those countries, under their own country's laws and classifications, listed them as endangered and gave them that level of protection. So that's the world that John and I came into. These birds were being released. The DDT was slowly leaving the ecosystem. And so finally, they were taken off the endangered species list. August of 1999, if I remember correctly. And by the way, any of these, I've got a car accident brain. I have huge memory issues. If there's a detail I'm not getting exactly right, this isn't a concise history lesson. Please, if you know more details about any of these and you want to give more complete history, feel free in the comments. Just plug it on in there and dates and stuff. But I believe August of 1999, they were delisted. And in preparation for that, there were laws that had been drafted and put in place to where they could be taken from the wild, that there could be a wild take, and that there would be some sort of a drawing. So when that was the case, here's where it starts to get scandalous. I only know what happened in Utah, and I believe Utah was the one who pioneered this. There was a falconer who was also a lawyer, and he went and said to the government, all right, the date has happened, and according to your own laws by the state, you're supposed to provide a drawing. I want to put in for that drawing. And basically the state said, well, no, we're not going to. And he's like, you have a legal obligation to follow your laws. And they just kind of brushed him off. So he sued the government and he won. And the government was not happy about that. So him and 2 other falconers did all pull and fly first year, IS baby peregrines. They loved them. They did really good with them. But there was kind of some pushback and a retaliation in 2 ways. The first way was that immediately after that take, the government said, well, you know what? We did list them as no longer endangered or threatened, but we want to be really sure. So we're going to shut down the wild take. It only happened once. We're going to shut it down, and we need to do one more study. And I think it was 4 or 5 years, and they're like, hey, for 4 or 5 years, no wild take. Let's monitor nests all over the place. And here's where it gets really strange. I used to do bird shows at sometime in the summer at Timpanogos Cave. And I talked to one of the rangers one year, and he told me, oh, yeah, you're a falconer. That's cool. I did that nest survey years ago that was 4 or 5 years long. And I'm like, oh, how'd it go? And he's like, well, I was at Dinosaur National Monument or National Park out in Vernal, Utah. And they came up to us and they said, hey, the government wants us to monitor the nests in the park. Does anybody want to volunteer to do that? And he's like, I don't know anything about birds, but sure, I'll do it. That sounds like fun. So they showed him where a nest was, and every few days he'd go check on it and just, look at them through a spotting scope and say, yep, they're there, they're doing good. Babies are raising fine. And he said, but then, right at the end, falconers stole all of the babies. And I'm like, what? What the heck? Why wouldn't, there is no wild take. No falconer is going to go illegally pull a peregrine, and certainly not pull an entire nest. What made you think that, did you see a falconer climbing in? And he's like, oh, no. What happened was they were getting bigger, and finally they got to where they were flying all around the cliff face. They'd sleep in the nest at night, but they were flying all around the cliff face and following the parents out. And then I didn't check on them for 2 or 3 weeks, and when I came back, they were all gone, even the parents. So I just put it down that a falconer must have taken them. I'm like, no, they fledged. They left. That's not a home. A nest is just a crib for a baby, and as soon as they can get out, they're out. He's like, oh, okay. Well, I didn't know that because I don't know anything about falcons, so I just assumed it was probably falconers. But you know what? Even though I put that down, isn't that crazy?
Wow.
But here's the other secret that he let out. He said, among his circles, I don't know if this is the whole agency, but among his, like the person above him who asked him to, do all this, he's like, hey, it doesn't matter. Do your best in your reporting. But he said, this is just kind of a routine, a formality. We know they're not endangered, but we've been given this mandate that we have to do, one more round of surveys. Because it was kind of a semi-retaliatory thing, it seemed like. So, kind of weird. Kind of weird when you think about that. But this is the other thing that happened on this time that people don't realize. In Utah, the state said, hey, you know what? And I'm saying the state because I don't want to call names. It really was, as I was told, a specific individual who was upset that the state had been sued and lost. And so he's like, okay, well, we're going to do a new rule that you cannot have the sky trials and you cannot have a meet or a trial. And a meet was defined as falconers getting together and hunting in a group, like, hey, it's an event. And trials were defined as like, hey, you're flying falcons and throwing up homing pigeons underneath them and testing their skills. Both of those, they said, like, okay, you cannot do those without our approval, and we'll give you a permit to do an event like that, and it has to be 6 months in advance, even though your sky trials are only 3 months from now. And so it shut down our Utah falconry events, and everybody was really sad about it. So that's why I started Winterfest at that time. That was my whole purpose. I tailor-made an event that specifically would not break any of their definitions of a meet or trial. I'm like, it's not a meet, it's not a trial, so therefore, I'm not breaking the rule by holding this event. So it's kind of crazy. But it's a lot of talking. That brings us, it's just the history, We're almost to fun stuff. This gets us up to almost today. After that second survey study, then they said, all right, okay, we legally have to do this lottery system where I can't remember how many originally it was. I thought it was like 9 permits were available to Utah residents and 1 for a non-resident. But they said you can only take them from the southern half of the state. You can only pull from nests south of I-70. And when you pull an IS, when you pull a baby, you must pluck 2 feathers from its breast, and you must deliver those to the Division of Wildlife Resources for them to do genetic tests on it. You know, it's like they wanted to make really sure that you weren't taking a bird from northern Utah. It's strange times. This is all very
I wonder
recent.
why that was. I mean,
it's unusual.
I guess maybe they thought that they were far more abundant in the south part of the state.
They definitely are. If you get down in the Red Rock country of Utah, I mean, they're everywhere. And in some places like around Lake Powell and stuff, they some people say they're almost overpopulated. Like you can't go around any canyon without there's another peregrine nest. So, but still, like very unusual. I thought that was strange.
Yeah, for sure. And during this time, I'd kind of moved to Arizona, and there wasn't the same things going on there as there was here in Utah.
Yeah, so it wasn't.
I'm not even sure. And if someone wants to comment in the comment section below, I don't even know if there is a Peregrine Take in Arizona yet. Let me know if there is.
I thought there was. I can't remember all the states that do and don't. I know wasn't able to make it out. Mike Dupay invited me out to one of the years to go trapping, not for my own bird, but just to come and enjoy trapping out in the Gulf of Mexico. And I was not able to make it. I would kill to do beach trapping, not even for my own bird, just to go out and experience it just like in the old days. But I know several states have it because they're not listed as endangered. But now it comes to modern day, where we're at modern day, as opposed to the ancient times we were discussing. But
in the ancient times when I was a young falconer.
Back in the day. So you now have had the opportunity to put in for the Peregrine Take, and you drew out. So what is the process like today, 2021, Utah? What was it like for you? What do you have to go through? What do you have to submit?
So nowadays, if you want to put in for the Peregrine Take, you just have to go to a website. And, I think the COVID world even helped us to streamline this a little bit more even. Because you can do the whole thing through their website where you just put in your information that you want to put in for the draw. They obviously get the list of names that are looking to do it, and they validate to make sure that they are appropriately licensed and have a current COR and everything. And then, of course, there's probably some additional validation that they have to perform on out-of-state falconers. At least when I was talking to one of the people who are running it, that's what they mentioned. Mm-hmm. And then after a certain period of time, they draw randomly to see who gets to take a peregrine. Mm-hmm. And this year I was lucky enough to be one of those people and get to fulfill a childhood dream of mine. Mm-hmm. I'm just hoping that, I can do it justice.
Yeah.
I haven't done a lot of big falcons, so this is something that I'm really interested in doing this year.
They do train so much easier than I know I'm biased, and I know people say that, people who have listened to my, other videos, and also you and I with our podcast, a lot of people are like, oh, it seems like Peregrine. And I'm like, I got to admit, if everybody loves something, I automatically am kind of repelled. I'm like, oh, if everybody likes Tyrannosaurus Rex and I don't like it because I don't want to. And it's like,
I mean, you do like lanners. So.
That's true. I am a lanner man, but even I love lanners more than peregrines. However, if you said, Ben, for the rest of your life, I'm not going to tell you what hunting circumstances, what prey, but it's prey for a large falcon. What falcon do you choose? Peregrine. They're just, you give credit where credit's due. I mean, they train easy. They train quickly. They're so much more loyal than other large falcons. They get in shape very quickly. They're perfect. Giant feet, just perfect balance of wing loading weight. But here,
I'll fully admit that I'm biased towards peregrines. I'm never going to tell you that I have any kind of objective views when it comes to big falcons, because I mean, it's like I said, it's been a childhood love of mine to have not only a peregrine. I mean, I've always there are a number of peregrines I would like. For example, I'd love a Peel's peregrine.
Yeah,
I would love. I'd love to have some of the, European, English peregrine, or I'd even like, what is it, a red-naped Shaheen?
Yeah, there's the red-naped Shaheen.
Isn't that a peregrine variant, right?
And then there's the one that I love is the black Shaheen. And that one is, now, they range like India, China, and a few different places, and the further you get in different directions, they're more or less extreme. But some of the photos I've seen out of India, they are like light-absorbing black, like a raven. You know how a raven reflects?
That's awesome.
Like their back and their head are just the blackest black on earth, and their chest is like orange pink. Like their chest is so bright it makes a red-tail's tail look dull.
Yeah, so I would love to have all of those, but before any of those, what I have always wanted is an Anatom peregrine.
Yeah.
And I think that it might have something to do with, the roots in my side of the mountain or something like that. But I think more than anything, it's just because that's what we have where I grew up, where I've lived most of my life. And so that's something that I've always wanted to do. And, that makes me biased. That's something I'll have to accept, huh?
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. I've flown a few different peregrines, probably 5 different subspecies, and I think the Anatom is the kindest. I really think out of all the I love me a giant dark female peels, but the Anatoms, they just are so good natured. They understand what you're trying to accomplish. Like if peregrines exemplify those traits of easy trainability and good-naturedness and fast learning, then I say the Anatom exemplifies it among all the peregrine subspecies. Now, if you have different experiences, go ahead and let us know what your experience has been, of course. But good heavens, it's a good bird.
I have no experiences, so no. I've had a couple of Gyr peregrines that I've mostly have had for short periods of time. My last one I purchased, at full price as a young bird. Ended up being kept in the same room with it for months and found out that I was very allergic to its dander.
Oh yeah,
and ended up having to sell it. It was terrible. I wish that I didn't have to do it, but I was so sick for months. We had no idea why I was sick. So I never got a chance to really do anything with them. So then the other one that I had was an older Gyr peregrine. I think it was like 12 or 13 years old. And I got it right after I was married. Took it down to Coolidge, Arizona, where I quite promptly discovered I really didn't have much to hunt it on. Didn't have any of the equipment to train it with. And a couple of the falconers down there were like, what are you doing with that? Why don't you go trap a Harris? And I'm like, oh yeah, I could trap Harrises. So because I was given the bird, I gave it away to another falconer and went out and trapped Harrises. So this is my opportunity right here to gain some of that experience so that I can agree or disagree with your assertion.
Yeah.
But of course, I also still don't have any objective comparisons. You have more experience than I do.
Well, and even also what John was kind of saying, I think it's good to have an honest balancing act of logic and passion, because it's easy for us or anyone else to be very preachy and be like, oh, do you have enough game? Do you have enough time? Do you live in the right country to, not like countryside, to fly this bird or that bird? These are important questions, and you want to do your bird justice. But you can go to the extremes of that, because do any of us need to fly falcons? Are any of us doing this because our life depends on it? Oh, it's my only way that I can bring home food for dinner is if I catch a rabbit with this goshawk. No, I mean, maybe a few people listening, but that's probably a stretch. These birds do not need us to practice falconry. Falconry can be many things. People get into it for different reasons. But so it's finding a balance between saying, hey, I'm doing something that's actually wildly ridiculous. Falconry. for whatever reason, because I love the birds, because I want a fun way to hunt, because I want to preserve history, whatever your motive is, it is about you. But yet, at the same time, you need to balance that with reality and say, if I live in a super dense forest, should I get a peregrine falcon? Probably not. Or like you experienced, you were in Arizona where having a big falcon in the particular area you were in didn't match up well. So you made a choice to switch out and get another bird. Now, what if there's a person who's so passionate about a falcon, they're like, I'm going to find a way. Well, okay.
They could have done it. Yeah, down there, I probably could have found a way to make it happen.
Yeah.
But it's funny because every time that I have had the opportunity in the past, just something has happened, and, it's not that I just didn't do falconry at all. It's just that I had to do something else. But this time, I really want to make it happen because this is something I've been dreaming of for a long time, and so I'm really excited about it.
Now, what are the dates? Do you recall what the dates are that they will let you pull? Because this goes into something.
I don't remember, but I can find out really quick.
Right.
Pardon the typing.
Okay, John's going to look that up, and here's the principle. Now, the ability to, if you have a permit, at least in Utah, and you are allowed to pull a peregrine, you technically can either pull a first-year eyas baby from a nest, or you can technically trap a first-year bird, a passage bird, that has left the nest and is migrating. But
that one will be tough.
Yeah.
The take dates are between May 1st and August 31st. So most birds are nesting and the hatching, but about usually the second week of May.
Mm-hmm.
And then that would put full fledging at about, 40 days?
Mm-hmm.
And then usually leaving the nest by not too long after that.
Yeah. And so it's a tricky thing. Now, Utah's got radical differences in elevation from the Uinta Mountains that are just insanely high.
Oh, yeah.
And there are nests up there. I know somebody who pulled one like one that was only like a week old or something at the very last week of the wild take. And it's like, huh? And on the other hand, the ones down in southern Utah, where it's so low in elevation in that Red Rock Desert, they're a lot of them are up and fledging in May. So,
well, that would put it kind of in line with some of the high altitude gosses and sharpies and things.
Yeah, it lines them right up. But the thing is, even though pulling a wild peregrine as a baby, raising it up, you have a fine falconry bird, I still say that the best bird is a passage peregrine, trapped very early in the season, somewhere between August and October. Now, we can't legally do that. I have one time trapped one that, came in at the very last week, went up to northern Utah, was trying to get a few. And I do know some falconers who are also involved in some of the biology projects who know good mountain ranges where they will, when they dry out, they will trap an August migrating peregrine. But really, it's like end of September, first week October. I wish so badly that we had that available.
Well, is there any biological reason not to allow it? Because I know that there's states in the eastern United States, right, that are allowing passage peregrine takes. I know I've seen pictures of someone that caught peregrines on the beach. I know they're east. I don't know where.
I think that was early. The thing is, some of the birds, like when you get all the way up to Canada, some of those birds get out of Dodge quick. I talked to, I can't remember his name. Oh, shoot. I can't remember his name. I was at a lecture. It was at the Arizona meet. Remember?
Yeah.
The guy. You were there. You invited me to that meet.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name, but he used to trap on some of the islands in the Gulf of Mexico. And he showed me, showed all of us, this one slide. And it's like, yeah, here's a bird that was banded in Canada like a week and a half before. And now it's in the Gulf of Mexico. It still had fluffy down feathers on its head, just a few. And some of the feathers on the wings were not fully hard penned. So it's like, it made it from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico in a week and a half with down on its head. It's like, so some of these birds, I think some of those eastern birds, their migration starts earlier. And so if you go to a hot spot where the migration kind of funnels them in, that you can find them early. But my understanding, though, is that the reason why they don't let us go longer is, if this is wrong and somebody knows the real reason, let me know. But what was explained to me in government meetings was that it has something to do with Canada's policy, and that Canada had thought that, like, hey, we don't want you trapping our peregrines, so we assume that our peregrines, by October are coming down, and we don't want you trapping it. Something like that. And that may be wrong, but that's the meetings I was in with the government. That's what was sort of conveyed.
I wasn't aware that Canada owned the Peregrines, but we'll just leave that where it is. Yeah. Speaking of activity with down still on them, I mean, I guess that's not entirely surprising. I mean, Isis had like 75 kills before, and she still had some down on the top of her head.
That's true.
But
it's a good point.
I have video of her out hunting with a little bit down on her head.
Yeah. I like to get them up and running fast. Yeah, that's I don't know, with a lot of falcons, if you're raising them from whether you're doing them as a hard imprint, a food imprint, a social imprint, if you are raising a falcon from a baby, I like to get them up and running really quickly. Not pushing them too hard, but just getting them to understand flight. But it still takes patience. Peregrines learn it quickly, but it takes time for them to fully learn the principles of flight and diving and landing and really getting a feel for it. And that's part of the process. It's part of the fun. Instead of just like, all right, I got a falcon. Now it needs to be waiting on above me and diving down on things that I'm hunting. It's like, yeah, but, let them learn. Let them spread their wings and get a real feel for it.
And I don't know if I'm going to do, like, there's some people that do tame hacking where they'll go out and they pretty much just go find a nice spot and then they let their bird go and fly. And I don't know if I'm going to do mine that way or not, or if I'm just going to start with a drone if I'm able to do that or what. But it'll certainly be something along those lines.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a blast either way. And peregrines, they key in so quickly on what waiting on is. My personal experience has been that the males usually pick up that idea of waiting on a little quicker and like understand, oh, this is what we're doing. Okay, now that I know it, I'm going to and start going up, where the females will often pick up on, oh, I need to circle around, but won't figure out going up on their own as quickly without something like a drone or a balloon or a kite setup. That's just my personal experience with the birds I've flown. Other people may have had other experiences, but
your experiences may vary.
The peregrines may not behave as described in this video. But they're wonderful birds. But I'm really excited. I think this is going to be a fun thing for you because they're amazing birds, and I can't praise them enough. Part of it, too, I got to be honest, John, I just see in falconry, and this isn't even bad, it just is. With the world shrinking and everybody being more digital and open lands getting gobbled up, I see more and more and more people gravitating towards microhawking or Harris hawks. And I just see, it seems like long winging with large long wings, at least in our state, it feels like it's dying.
I have to admit that is a small part of my motivation of wanting to just do this right now and commit to it, is that I do definitely see the allure of microhawking, because I find myself being a relative city dweller. I'll see what I can do about that in the next few months here. But because of that, the microhawking has just been a better setup for me. But that doesn't mean that you can't commit some time and commit some effort, commit some money, and make long wing flying effective. Many people do it.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly not the first city dweller to do it, not by far. In fact, I'm going to be going by the example of others who have done it before me. But yeah, I totally understand the idea that this could be something that isn't going to be around forever, or at least is going to be harder and harder to do as hunting territories and training areas are invaded by additional growth.
Exactly. And it's again, falconry is ridiculous. Like it takes so much work, so much effort, and you know, if you're like, I'm doing this because this bird needs me, then you're fooling yourself. It's like, it is about the fact that life is short. Passion is great. It gives life focus, and it's a grand way to experience life. So, you know, get your ducks in a row and enjoy it. And to me, if you're, I don't know, I won't say his name because, again, I usually try not to unless I talk to him anyway. But one of my mentors, and he's still an amazing falconer and a propagator. And it's interesting, we were talking one time, and he's had everything under the sun over the years. And, you know, as a kid, you know, back in the 1900s, and I've had tons of stuff too. And we were talking about goshawks and eagles, and which he's flown and loved. And he's like, well, he's like, you know, hey, that's not really falconry. You know, Harris hawks and red tails and even goshawks, that's not really falconry. I'm like, what do you mean? and I'm like, and I know, okay, maybe hawks, that's being an ostringer instead of a falconer, but that wasn't his point. In his mind, true falconry is taking a big, long-winged falcon, training it to wait on, to circle above, and to dive down hundreds of miles an hour from thousands of feet, and to stoop on truly noble quarry like grouse or pintails or a rooster pheasant. And it's like, that is falconry in its grandest form. It's easier to train an eagle. It's more dangerous, but it's easier to train a golden eagle. It's easier to train and have success with a temperamental goshawk than to properly train a big long wing in this old grand style. And I hope it doesn't ever disappear, because even if not many people practice true long winging, it's amazing when everything comes together. It's the most remarkable thing you'll ever see.
Well, I guess that speaks to the idea that falconry is what you make it. So, you know, I guess to some people that is what falconry is, and that's totally fine. Just like some people wouldn't think for a moment of flying a big falcon when there's red tails that exist, or Harris hawks that exist, or goshawks that exist. Mm-hmm. So it's one of the things that makes falconry so awesome, is that there is something for most people.
Yeah.
At least most people that have a life that could be compatible with falconry. I suppose we'd have to stipulate that.
Yeah.
Because not everybody's life is going to work with falconry.
Mm-hmm. And if you have a dream, if you have a species you're passionate about, both John and I are like, hey, do your due diligence and enjoy what you're doing and get out and fly your birds, and fine. I mean, heck, if you look at my YouTube channel, I had the audacity to do a video about using harriers in falconry, and even point out the fact that that's the only bird they hunt with properly in New Zealand. And it's like, okay, that's a weird bird. And some people are like, well, why would you do that? Well, if you're just really passionate about harriers and you want to, and it's legal and you're getting out and do it, go for it. There's opportunities today for all different types of falconry. Try to balance logic with passion. I think passion is what fuels falconry, and logic is what limits falconry. And sometimes you need to limit and cut back, or change which birds you're after. And sometimes you need to be passionate and say, hey, life is short and life is a gift. And what do you want to fill your time with? And in this case, it's a peregrine.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like we mentioned in the past, you know, to me, falconry is definitely a hunting sport. And so there's a delineation for me between pet keeping and falconry. So, hey, if there's something you want to fly and you want to, and it's odd, as long as you're trying to hunt it, it's fine with me.
Yeah. I mean, there's all different styles. There's all different ways. And again, it's always good to keep the balance and say, you know, we've done in previous episodes, we've talked about like, hey, if you really want to work with birds and you're like, geez, I can't do justice doing the falconry, and instead you want to get into education, or maybe you're going to go, volunteer or work at a zoo or an aviary or something, that's fine. There's no shame in that. But the important thing to remember in the back of your head is that it is about your experience. You need to do justice to the birds in whatever way you're working with them, but the birds don't need you to go do education with them. The falcon doesn't need you to go fly it. If you didn't exist, the falcon would be out flying itself. So find what works for you and enjoy it, and enjoy flying your bird.
Absolutely.
So we covered a lot of stuff. I did a lot of yakking because I went over a lot of history. Again, I mean, you could probably Google search, videos or some of the history on, the trapping in the early days on the Gulf of Mexico and Assateague Island, and there are people who do it today in the proper seasons.
Yeah, there's new videos. I've seen a bunch of the new trapping videos for. Just look up Peregrine beach trapping.
Yeah,
there's plenty of really cool stuff, and for trapping nuts like Ben and I can lose myself watching some of the videos because they're just fun.
It's just amazing.
It's just fun. I would love to go do that.
And if you want, again, you can check out my book, Trapping Essentials. You can buy it online. And that I go over the interviews of talking about how some of those early techniques came about, and how even some of the traps that they didn't want other falconers to know about, how they got kind of leaked out through Life magazine accidentally. So it's kind of some fun stories there. But again, also be sure to check out John's YouTube channel. Again, it's Falcon's Ledge, and let him know that you were here and you listen to him here as well. And I don't know, anything else, John?
No, that's it. Just have fun in your molt if you're a falconer, and
enjoy your summer off.
Enjoy your summer.
And so catch us next time. And as always, happy hawking.